What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Fast and Furious season here on Cinematic Reviews. As always, I'm your host, Chris, and this is a show about all things movie and TV. Every week, I break down and review the newest releases, beloved franchises like Fast and Furious, and even upcoming projects. You can support the show by hitting that follow button on your favorite podcast network, as well as following it on all social media platforms. You can find all those handles on either the Cinematic Reviews Facebook page or the show's website at podpage.com/cinematic reviews. It helps the podcast out a lot, and I appreciate all the love and support out there from everyone. This time, it ain't just about being fast. Furious 7 is speeding your way.
Brian, you're up!
You good?
We're being hunted.
So this is gonna be a street fight?
Oh, Daddy's gotta go to work.
If you want to glimpse the future, just look behind you. You can't outrun the past.
Cars don't fly!
This is a world that doesn't play by your rules. And you and your friends are a part of it now.
Let's do this.
I don't have friends. I got family.
Furious 7 was released on April 3rd, 2015. The film stars Vin Diesel as Dominic Toretto, Paul Walker as Brian O'Connor, Dwayne Johnson as Luke Hobbs, Michelle Rodriguez as Letty Ortiz, and Jason Statham as Deckard Shaw. It was directed by James Wan, who is best known for this, Insidious, The Conjuring, and DC's Aquaman. Justin Lin did not return to direct this installment because he was still doing post-production for Fast and Furious 6. The film grossed over $1.5 billion worldwide against a budget of $190 million, making it the highest grossing film of the franchise. The film was to be released on July 11th, 2014, but production was halted on December 1st, 2013, after the passing of Paul Walker on November 30th, 2013. Walker was killed in a car crash halfway through filming. Body doubles, stunt doubles, and archive footage were used to complete the film following the death of Paul Walker. Walker's brothers Caleb and Cody were among the doubles, along with providing voiceover for the Brian O'Connor character. The first scene with the CGI version of Paul Walker is about 15 minutes into the film. The film scene where Paul Walker's car veers off the main road onto a ramp is reminiscent of the missing man formation flown by military pilots when they have lost a comrade. Jordana Brewster had to film her scenes at the very end of filming due to her commitments to the Dallas TV series. Since Paul Walker had already passed by then, she had to perform the scenes opposite one of Walker's brothers or with him inserted via computer graphics. Over 230 cars were destroyed during filming. Denzel Washington turned down the role of Mr. Nobody, which ultimately went to Kurt Russell. That would have been really interesting. Taylor Lautner and Halle Berry were also considered. Halle Berry would have been an interesting choice as well. I don't think Taylor Lautner would have quite worked out, but I think Kurt Russell was a nice follow-up to either of these actors. Dwayne Johnson would have been unable to participate in the film if Universal pursued filming Fast 6 and Furious 7 back-to-back due to his commitments to the film Hercules. The start date for Furious 7 was delayed long enough for Hercules to finish production, and so we have Dwayne Johnson in the film. If you notice, he shows up at the beginning and then he doesn't show up at the end. That is because of that production with Hercules. The film surpassed James Cameron's Avatar as the fastest film to gross $1 billion. And then lastly, the song See You Again by Wiz Khalifa and Charlie Puth was dedicated to Paul Walker. So Furious 7 is another one of the films that I've been really looking forward to ever since I announced the Fast and Furious season for the podcast. I love this film. I think James Wan did an awesome job with it, considering the massive hurdle that he and the crew had to overcome. For those that don't know, Paul Walker tragically passed away during the filming of Furious 7 on November 30th, 2013. Walker and his friend Roger Rodas were in a single vehicle collision Walker is survived by his only child, Meadow Walker, who actually had a cameo in Fast X. I was really heartbroken when news broke about Walker's death. I was honestly in shock. It was very similar to when the news came out about Heath Ledger passing away right before the release of The Dark Knight. I couldn't believe it. I've been a huge fan of Paul Walker. I am still a fan of his today. Um, he him playing Brian O'Connor in the Fast and Furious franchise is probably what he's best known for. But I've seen most of, if not all of his films. The Fast and the Furious was the first film I ever saw him in. And then after that, I became an instant fan. Before his passing, I think he was the best actor in this franchise, honestly. Yeah, he really only had, one note when it came to acting, but he was at least aware of it. He knew what he was good at, and he stuck to it. The actor I typically compare him to is Mark Wahlberg. He's Paul Walker in every film that he does, just like, Mark Wahlberg is Mark Wahlberg in his films. I think Paul Walker is a better actor than Mark Wahlberg. That might be a hot take, but that's just how I feel. But they are kind of similar in their acting style. Looking at Paul Walker's IMDb page, he probably the first film that he was really big on was Varsity Blues. But after that, The Fast and Furious kind of just put him on the map. And then after that, he became a part of this franchise. And then that kind of spread out into other films that he was able to explore, like The Skulls, which actually I think came out before The Fast and the Furious. But I don't think a lot of people went to that until after seeing him in The Fast and the Furious. That is a really interesting film. It's that one about, the secret fraternity and all that stuff. Then he was in Joyride with Steve Zahn. That was a big film when I was growing up. I haven't seen it since, though. I should give that a rewatch. Then he went into Timeline with Gerard Butler, which I enjoy because, of course, time travel is my favorite movie trope. So obviously I'm going to gravitate toward a film titled Timeline. He did a couple of more Fast and Furious films after that. Then he went on to Takers with Idris Elba, which is a really cool heist movie. That is actually on the list, I think, for a future season that I will talk about later on. While he was doing Furious 7, he was also working on Brick Mansions. This came out, I believe, after Furious 7. At the end of that film, there is a little dedication to him as well. Definitely check that one out. That's got a lot of cool parkour scenes in it. I think it's a really, really underrated Paul Walker film. It's kind of a small story, but it's a pretty cool movie. And then, of course, Furious 7 was his last film. Which I will talk about on today's episode. It's just a beautiful, beautiful film. I love what James Wan did, and the fact that they were able to finish this movie off is really cool. I remember when, the news broke about Paul Walker and the filming shut down, there were a lot of questions about, are they going to finish the movie? Are they not going to finish the movie? Is this where the franchise ends? I think they made the right choice in finishing the movie. I think that's something Paul Walker would have wanted them to do. And I know Vin Diesel was pretty vocal at the time about, we're going to finish this movie for Paul because this is what he wanted. And now we're 4 or 5 films since his passing. And from what I understand, it seems like the crew is doing this in honor of Paul because they believe that Paul would want them to go on with the franchise. And everyone has their opinion with these new installments. Me personally, I think Furious 7 was the last good installment of this franchise. After this, it kind of goes really downhill as far as quality, but it's so good to know that we have this film with us, because I think they did just an awesome job finishing up, considering how big of a part Paul Walker was in it. I really enjoy Paul Walker's work as an actor, like I keep saying. Walker is just going to be really, really missed, especially within this Fast and Furious fan base. You can really feel his absence, like The Fate of the Furious, which is the film after Furious 7, if you're not familiar with the timeline. But I do really, really love the decision to keep Brian alive within the Fast universe. I think killing him off would have been a really disrespectful thing to him. I know that was another big question that was going around when Furious 7's production stopped and then resumed. Everyone was kind of had their own theories on what they were going to do. A lot of people thought that they were going to kill him off, which is understandable. That's typically the route that they do when an actor dies, especially in a franchise. But in the end, I think they made the right decision. We get hints here and there about Brian in future installments, so that's always fun. But at the same time, he makes you miss him even more when they mention his name. That's one of my main issues with the future installments, particularly Fast and Furious. Fate of the Furious. But I'll dive into that on the next episode. I want to keep my thoughts with Furious 7 because if you've been following my rankings, it's my second favorite film in the franchise. There can be an argument made for it to be the number one. I just really, really think Fast 5 is overall a better film. But on a given day, I could easily put this as my favorite because there's so much good stuff in there. So Furious 7 not only picks up where Fast and Furious 6 leaves off, but it also ties in Tokyo Drift. Tokyo Drift actually takes place before and during Furious 7. It's a little confusing, so I'll do my best to explain it. Most of Tokyo Drift happens right before Fast 6. When we get to the death of Han in Tokyo Drift, that is happening during the first part of Fast 6. And then a couple of scenes later in Fast 6, we see Dom go to Tokyo. That is actually the last scene in Tokyo Drift. I'm sure you can find the two films spliced together on YouTube or something. It's really cool to watch if you can find a decently made copy of it. There are a couple of good ones out there, so they do exist, but it's really interesting to see these two films spliced together in, timeline accurate order. Statham, who plays Deckard Shaw in the film, was really revealed to be the person behind Han's death at the end of Fast and Furious 6 in that post-credit scene, if you remember that. And he returns in Furious 7 to seek revenge on Dom and the rest of the crew for going after his brother Owen Shaw, who was played by Luke Evans in Fast 6. And then we get to see Luke Evans in the hospital bed for a quick scene there at the beginning of the film. That's the first part of the story in Furious 7. The other part involves Nathalie Emmanuel's Ramsey. Nathalie Emmanuel, of course, starred in HBO's Game of Thrones Missandei, if you remember that. Ramsey in Furious 7 is a hacker, basically. She invented this device called the God's Eye, which basically can find a person anywhere in the world through street cameras, satellites, phones, whatever. Pretty much any electronic device with a camera on it can be used to find somebody around the world. It's Big Brother, essentially, if you're familiar with that term. That's what God's Eye is. It's the MacGuffin of the film. Dom and the crew are recruited by Kurt Russell's Mr. Nobody. He is the head of this shadow agency within the U.S. government. They didn't really give it a name in the franchise. I think they just call it the agency. So if you ever hear me say the agency, I'm referring to Kurt Russell and his crew and all that. The agency becomes a pretty big element in future installments. With a franchise like this, that's really the only route you can go. Vin Diesel going from DVD player thief to government agent sounds ridiculous, and trust me, it is. I'm a huge fan of this franchise, but I can agree that it's freaking ridiculous that this is a concept, but that's what the franchise is now. I don't agree with every decision, of course, that is made in this franchise, but I accept it because I love the core element of the franchise, which is family. I like Kurt Russell in this. He was pretty goofy at times, but very entertaining. You can tell that he had a lot of fun being a part of this franchise. Denzel was the first choice for the role, and he would have been an awesome part of the franchise, but I think Russell was a great second choice for sure. Dwayne Johnson returns, but only in a few scenes, like I said earlier, because he was filming Hercules at the same time of this. Again, I really like him in this. Him taking down a Predator drone with a freaking ambulance was nuts, and I loved it. Ludacris and Tyrese return as Tej and Roman. I love their whole thing with dunking on each other throughout the film. They end up fighting over who will quote unquote land Ramsey. If you remember, Roman called dibs on her, which is really middle school like. I remember those days. Michelle Rodriguez is back as Letty. She is trying to get her memories back, which eventually she does at the end of the film. I love Michelle Rodriguez. Letty is my favorite character now after the passing of Paul Walker. Brian will always be my dude, though. He has always been my favorite since the first film and always will be. But Letty is freaking awesome in these newer installments. Jaimin Hansu makes his debut in the franchise as terrorist leader Jakande. He teams up with Statham about halfway through the film. He wants the God's Eye so he allies himself with Statham in order to get it. If you listen to the podcast regularly, you know I'm a huge fan of Jaimin Hansu. Whenever he shows up in a film, I get really, really excited because I think he's a very underrated actor. I just saw him in Gran Turismo. I'm really excited for you all to see him in that when it finally releases next week. He's great in that. He's great in anything that he does, really. Go check him out in Blood Diamond with DiCaprio. That put him pretty much on the map as a big time actor for sure. I love all the action sequences in this film. There are some very, very iconic ones in this, like Paul Walker running up the bus, Dom and Deckard Shaw playing chicken with their cars, not once but twice in the film. There's skydiving with cars, taking out Predator drones with ambulances, like I mentioned. There are so many awesome action sequences in this film, and I'm really, really excited to break them down today. And the music in the film is freaking awesome as well. When the film came out back in 2015, I listened to the soundtrack on repeat, honestly. I love every song in the film, especially See You Again by Wiz Khalifa and Charlie Puth. During that Paul Walker tribute scene at the end, which was amazing. They did a great job at that little tribute for Paul Walker at the end. The song helps elevate it, and it gets me every time it comes on. One of my favorite songs of all time for sure. Let's take a quick break before diving into today's standout scenes of Furious 7. Check out new release reactions every week on the show. Each week I break down and react to the newest releases hitting theaters or the streaming world. The Gran Turismo reaction episode is out now. Gran Turismo officially releases on August 25th, but I was lucky enough to see it a couple of weeks early. So head over to your favorite podcast platform to listen to that episode and the rest of the Cinematic Reviews library today. Now, I typically try to keep the standout scenes to 10, but it was really difficult for this film. I think I ended up with 14 on this list here. So I'll run through these. The first one I have is the opening sequence with Deckard Shaw at the hospital. This was kind of Statham's big reveal or big introduction into the franchise, other than that little post-credit scene that we saw at the end of Fast 6. But this was really cool to kind of show that Statham is not messing around. As the camera slowly pans out, we see that he just annihilated everybody in this hospital. This hospital is ready to just fall within itself. This thing was just demolished, and as much as it would have been really, really awesome to see him do this, I think it creates this really cool ambiance around it where you can just kind of just imagine for yourself what it would look like if he did this. But yeah, this was a really, really awesome way to open up the movie. We get a really, really cool song. I don't remember the name of it, but it's on the soundtrack, and it's one of my favorites of the soundtrack for sure. Yeah, just an awesome way to introduce Statham into the franchise and to kind of show the audience that, hey, this is going to be a serious but wild installment of the Fast franchise. Then we switch over to Shaw paying Hobbs a little visit at the DSS office. We get this really cool showdown between Statham and Dwayne Johnson, which is really cool. Really showing that Statham is using his stealth and his agility versus, Dwayne is a big dude. He relies a lot on his muscles and his size, but Statham is easily capable of overcoming him with his gadgets and his agility to take down this large target. And it's really awesome how they film this. They're in this little tiny office. You got The Rock throwing Statham around. You got Statham just punching and kicking the crap out of Dwayne Johnson. It's really, really awesome to see these two fight each other who come from two separate, areas of fighting where, like I said, the Dwayne Johnson uses his strength and his size versus Statham using his quickness and his agility to take it down. It's really kind of a David and Goliath type of scenario. Then we have Shaw blowing up the Toretto house, which was crazy. This is actually the first scene where we get the CGI version of Paul Walker. So Statham drops off a box for the Torettos. It turns out to be a bomb inside of it. Actually, while this is going on, this is where Tokyo Drift kind of ties in. So Statham calls Dom to kind of, give him a hint that, hey, I'm coming after you and your family. I've already taken one of you out. This was the phone call that we see Statham on at the end of Fast 6 in that post-credit scene. So that's kind of where Tokyo Drift starts to tie in here, is this scene here. The bomb goes off. We get that really intense scene where, the debris is going to hit the van. We have little Jack in there. So Paul Walker quickly closes the door really fast, and he gets thrown into the van very, very violently. But yeah, it's just a crazy, crazy scene. Again, setting up this fact that Statham is not messing around. Like, he is serious. He will kill everybody that was involved with taking out his brother Owen. Then we get to the Tokyo Drift scene where Dom heads over to Tokyo to retrieve the remains of Han. He talks with Lucas Black, Sean, after their little race, that we see at the end of Tokyo Drift. That's another scene that ties into here. We kind of see what happens after their race. It's insinuated that, of course, Dom beat him in the race. So that was really cool to kind of get that blast from the past from Tokyo Drift all these years later. Then we have Dom and Deckard Shaw playing chicken with their cars for the first time. So we have the funeral for Han. Statham ends up showing up in his really, really cool car. Dom gets into his Dodge, and he goes rolling down after him. They come to this kind of alleyway underpass type area, and we're not exactly sure what's about to happen. They start driving towards each other. It's like, is one gonna move out of the way? Nope. They collide into each other, and it's so violent. They probably both should have died in this crash. It was just crazy that they actually went head to head with the cars and collided into each other. Statham, of course, came prepared. He reinforced his chassis, as Dom mentions out. It's like going into the ring with the weighted gloves. And then Statham replies, I'm not playing games. This is serious. I've come to just annihilate you guys. And then this is where Kurt Russell shows up, and we are introduced to the agency that Kurt Russell works for. Then that leads into the skydiving with cars scene, which is probably my favorite scene here out of this list. But the tribute for Paul Walker, it's tough to beat that, and I'll get to that shortly. But this skydiving with the cars is pretty fun. So Roman gets this idea of attacking this convoy in the middle of the road that they're on this mountainside where you really can't access it. So Tej ends up getting this idea of, what if we drop down onto that road from the sky in cars? So that's where that kind of gets created. And then we get this scene where they drive out of this plane. They have GPS guided alarms to let them know when they get to a certain feet to hit that button, and their parachute shoots out. Roman ends up getting scared, so Tej has to force him out of the plane by ejecting his parachute sooner. He goes flying out. He's spinning all over the place in the air. Really crazy scene. I mean, this is really where the franchise starts to just get freaking nuts with the stunts. I mean, skydiving with cars sounds freaking insane, and they did it. It's just go back and watch that scene. It's really, really awesome how they did this. I love Paul Walker's reaction when they're free falling through the air, and he's just trying to stay calm, but you could tell inside that Paul Walker's freaking out about skydiving with cars. Then the next scene I have is Dom and the crew taking down the convoy / Brian running up the bus, which is a very iconic scene. Love this action sequence here. We have Dom and the crew, landing from the skydiving scene. They take on this convoy that's carrying Ramsey. So they have to infiltrate the convoy, take it out, and then get Ramsey out of there before Jaconde's men can interrogate her for the God's Eye location. Really, really cool. I mean, this bus is all decked out. It's got computers. It's got machine guns on each side of it. It's got an arsenal within. It's just really, really cool how this bus was all decked out. It's got cars around it, shooting RPGs and machine guns at them. I love that scene where they open up the little doors on the bus and the machine guns come out and Tej gets that old crap look. He starts cranking up his window. I always chuckle at that part. But yeah, this is really cool. Eventually the bus gets flipped over while Brian's inside of it. It's sliding down the road off of this cliff, so he has to climb out and climb on top of it. While the bus is falling over this cliff, we get the scene of Paul Walker running up, and he has to jump off of the bus, and Letty catches him with the car. Yeah, just a really, really awesome action scene for sure. Then we get to another iconic scene from this film, and that is jumping the Abu Dhabi Towers in that supercar that Dom and Brian are in. They don't just jump from building to building. They jump from building to building to building. They do 3 jumps is how they say. Because I think Ramsey's buddy in there, I can't remember his name. I should have looked it up. But he goes, 2 jumps, that's an insult. 3, that's how you do it. I'm paraphrasing that line, but that's kind of what he says. This scene is nuts. Like this isn't even possible. So the God's Eye ends up being into the supercar. Brian and Dom go in to try to get the God's Eye. Deckard Shaw shows up. So all hell's breaking loose. This forces Dom to get this bright idea to run away from Statham, who's got a grenade launcher. So he drives out the window, crashes into the building next to it. All while this is happening, Brian's breaking through the supercar to get to the God's Eye. Then they jump another building. Yeah, it's freaking nuts. I love how they shot this film. I mean, shot the film, but shot this scene for sure. It's really, really cool. I mean, it's the cover of the DVD box. Yeah, this is just a crazy, crazy sequence. Then we get Mr. Nobody and the team attempting to take down Shaw. This is where we get the reveal that Statham is working with Djimon Hounsou. They perform this little dark ops sting mission in the middle of the night. Statham is sitting there eating dinner in this warehouse. I love that little move where he goes to wipe his mouth with the napkin, but underneath the napkin, he pulls the pin from the grenade to kind of say, hey, you're not going to take me. I'm going to just blow us all to hell. Thought that was a really badass move by Statham. And then this gunfight shows up. Kurt Russell puts on his little night vision sunglasses and he just goes to town with his pistols. He ends up getting shot a couple times, so they got to evac him out of there, and then he's taken away to some secret facility where he'll rest up from taking all these gunshots. But yeah, this is a really, really cool gunfight. Kind of dark, so you don't get to see a whole lot, but really showing off that Paul Walker can still, fire a gun tactically from all his training. So that's cool. Then we get this big LA scene, which is kind of the climax or the final act of the film. A couple things are going on at the same time. We have Brian, Roman, Tej playing hot potato with Ramsey. Letty shows up also to play hot potato a little bit. They're throwing her from car to car to kind of throw off Djimon Hounsou, who eventually got his hands on the God's Eye. So he's using it to track down Ramsey and the team to annihilate them. They're trying to hack into the God's Eye so that they can take power away from Djimon Hounsou. There's a lot of things going on in this final act. On top of that, we get Deckard Shaw and Dominic fighting on top of this garage structure. They do the chicken with the cars again, except this time Dom, I don't know what the technical term is, but he lifts his car up on the back tires and shoves his front end into Deckard's windshield to take him out, kind of insinuating that he learned from the last time they played chicken and he kind of won. And then they start this big hand-to-hand fight with wrenches and metal poles and stuff. And it's pretty crazy hand-to-hand combat, really showing off that Statham knows his fighting techniques. So that's kind of cool. Then we get to this other scene at the same time where Hobbs is watching all this go down on the news. We get that scene of him breaking out of his arm cast. He says, Daddy's got to go to work. So he puts on his uniform and heads out to the downtown LA so he can help them take down Jakande and Statham. So he takes one of the ambulances from the hospital and crashes it into the Predator drone that's flying around shooting these missiles at Brian and the team. So really unrealistic, but it's a really cool scene though. And the fact that he was able to take out a Predator drone with a freaking ambulance is nuts. Then we get the scene where Dom takes out Djimon Hounsou's helicopter by driving his car up of a broken down part of the garage structure. That flies him up in the air, and it looks like he's trying to hit the helicopter of the car, but in fact he's trying to hook a bag of grenades on the helicopter so that Dwayne Johnson can shoot the bag of grenades. I'm not sure how he knew Dwayne Johnson was down there. It's kind of like they have this psychonetic bond between. I don't know. It's one of the negatives I have with this film, where it's like, how did Vin Diesel know that Dwayne Johnson was standing there in the spot with his gun to shoot that bag of grenades? And how did The Rock even see the bag of grenades hanging from the helicopter? It's little things like that you kind of have to nitpick in these movies. But it's still it's a pretty cool scene though, seeing Dom's car fly into the air, hooking a bag of grenades. It's still a pretty cool action sequence. And then the last scene I have is, of course, that tribute at the end to Paul Walker, which is just incredible. I remember watching the film in the theater opening weekend, and when it came to this scene, all you could hear in the theater was everybody tearing up, sniffling, trying not to let their tears out. We were all experiencing the same emotion at the same time, and it was incredible. One of my favorite theater going experiences ever. Just beautifully well done. We get the flashbacks from the previous Fast and Furious scenes. We have Wiz Khalifa and Charlie Puth coming in with "See You Again," which they dedicated to Paul Walker. We get this really touching moment with Vin Diesel in his car, and then Paul Walker pulling up with a white version of his GT that he always drives. And then, we get that really iconic line from Paul Walker where he goes, "You think you could leave without saying goodbye?" And then we get the voiceover from Vin Diesel, which I have in the favorite quotes, and I guess I'll do it now. So he's talking about what he's feeling in moments. So he starts with, "I used to say I lived my life a quarter mile at a time. And I think that's why we were brothers, because you did too." And then he goes on to say, "You'll always be with me. You will always be my brother." Very touching words from Vin Diesel about not just Brian, but Paul Walker kind of breaking that fourth wall. So yeah, just a beautiful, beautiful scene and a tribute to Paul Walker at the end of the film. So yeah, it's either a tie between that and the skydiving with cars scene is my favorite standout scene. I think I'll just pick both of them because it's hard to take anything over to that tribute to Paul Walker. Next up, we have some more favorite quotes. All right, some more favorite quotes. I said the ones from Dom during the tribute to Paul Walker. I also have one from Mia here. He doesn't miss the girls, doesn't miss the cars, he misses the bullets. This one from Deckard Shaw. "Dominic Toretto, you don't know me, but you're about to." He says this in Furious 7, then he also says this in the post-credit scene of Fast and Furious 6. That line's probably the one that I remember the most from Statham in these movies. This one from Hobbs. I'm I'm going to give him a hurt so bad he's going to wish his mama kept her legs close. I always chuckle at that one. This one from Brian. The only thing I've seen him take down is No Knees Denise. Remember from prom? That one always gets a chuckle at me too. A couple more from Dom. This time it ain't just about being fast. I opened up the episode with that one. Nothing sadder than locking a beast in a cage. This is him talking about the supercar that they have, that the sheik in Abu Dhabi, or the prince, keeps in his penthouse. Another one from Brian. Cars don't fly. Couple more from Hobbs. Daddy's got to go to work. Woman, I am the cavalry. I always check out that one too. Yeah, so my favorites. This is tough. I really like the two lines that Dom says during the tribute to Paul Walker at the end. So I think I'm going to pick those, even though all these that I listed here are really great. But I'm going to go with Vin Diesel's words at the end of the film when he's talking about Brian and Paul Walker during that tribute. So next is favorite car. Really, really tough. I like all the cars that Brian drives in here. Letty's green Dodge is really cool. But I'm going to go with Dom and Tej's Demon Love Child, which is really freaking cool. This is the car that he drives during the convoy takedown. Then eventually he drives it off a mountain with him and Ramsey inside of it. And it's demolished, but it stays intact enough to keep Ramsey and Dom alive. I thought that was really cool. And I love that they actually, I was trying to Google what the actual name is. I guess the actual name is Demon Love Child. So that's what we're going to go with. Favorite stunts, got to be the skydiving with cars scene. Just really, really awesome scene. I love that one. I love how it's shot. I love Paul Walker's reaction during it. I love the idea of skydiving with cars and then having parachutes attached to them. That's just freaking nuts. Couple negatives. I mentioned the third act with the whole, how did Vin Diesel know that The Rock was sitting down there with a gun ready to shoot the grenades? How did The Rock see the bag of grenades on a helicopter? But a couple other ones. There was no lime in Dom's Corona for Mr. Nobody, which to me is a huge red flag. Put a lime in that Corona, Dom. You're not an animal. You got to have a lime in Corona. That's just my rule. You can't. It's sacrilegious, honestly. Then the other one I have is just Paul Walker passing away. You know, it's a negative for the rest of the franchise because we've seen these installments as far as quality goes ever since Paul Walker passed, and it sucks, honestly. I think the franchise took a huge hit with losing Paul Walker. So just imagine how great, and I'll talk about this more in the next episode. Just imagine how great the Fate of the Furious would have been if Brian was there and he's the one that had to go up against Dom when he turns. Since he passed away, it was kind of Letty who was taking over that role, but it would have been much, much more impactful if it was Brian going up against Vin Diesel when he ends up turning on the team in Fate of the Furious. Now I know it's beyond our ability to bring back Paul Walker, but it's tragic. It was just a freak incident that happened. But it is I consider it a negative for the franchise because I just think losing him really impacted the franchise in a negative way, and this is how I feel. I really think that the franchise is worse now because of his passing, and it's tragic and it sucks. That's just the world we live in right now, and it's unfortunate. Maybe in another, in the multiverse of things, maybe there's a reality where Paul Walker didn't die, and we get Fast 8, 9, and 10 with Paul Walker, and it's nice to think that there is a reality out there, maybe that he didn't die. We unfortunately are living in a world that he did pass away, and all we can do now is just honor him the best way we can. And I'm glad that they're making these movies to honor him and all that. So that's really cool. Lastly, a couple of burning questions. Will Brian and Mia's kids show up in the future installment? 9 and 10, we've been getting a lot of little B, who is the son of Elena and Dom. But since the passing of Elena, Letty has become kind of the stepmom to little B. Little B was a big part of Fast X, and is probably going to be a big part of Fast 11 and 12. But yeah, that'd be really cool if we got to see me and Brian's kids come into the franchise as older. They of course are. I'm not exactly sure on the timeline, but I gotta imagine Jack's got to be what 2-3 years older than Little B. So he's probably driving cars by the time we get to Fast 11 or Fast 12. Stay with their daughter. The daughter's probably a year older than Little B. I'm not exactly sure. And that's another thing I'll talk about on the next episode of Fate of the Furious. The timeline with Dom's kid is weird, and how Elena was pregnant, and it just, that whole timeline doesn't add up, and I'll talk about that more. But yeah, it'd be really cool to get Brian and Mia's kid, especially at the very least get Jack in here, because I think by the time Fast 11 and 12 come out, like Jack could be driving cars, and so that would be really cool if he came in and kind of took over the Brian O'Connor role. That's just my dream. That's my prediction. I hope that happens, because that'd be really cool. I'll have to think about fan casting for Jack too. I'll think that over and then talk about it in future installments. Second burning question I had was, will we see more CGI Paul Walker in future installments? I hope to God not. It sounds like the family said that this was a one and done type of situation. But I wouldn't pass Universal to try to get this to go again. I think the story has to be right for this to work. But at the end of the day, I hope that they just don't. I understand in this situation it needed to be done, but we don't need it anymore. In Fast 9, we get the hint that Brian's coming over for the barbecue. All we see is his blue GTR. It's blacked out windows. We don't see a stunt double or CGI Paul Walker in that. We just see his car, which I think was the right decision. But yeah, I hope we're done with CGI Paul Walker. Just leave him alone. Let him live life in the background. Mention him once in a while. We don't need CGI Paul Walker. This is a one and done situation. And from what it sounds like the family feels the same way. This was a one and done. They did this situation in order to honor Paul, to finish this movie that he started, and that's it. We don't need any more CGI Paul Walker. But if the family is okay with it, then I can be persuaded into being okay with it also. But it all comes down to what the family needs. To end the episode, let's go over the Fast and Furious rankings. So here is the Fast and Furious rankings as they stand today. Number 1, Fast 5. 2, Furious 7. 3, Fast and Furious 6. 4, The Fast and the Furious. 5, Fast and Furious, aka Fast 4. Number 6, Too Fast, Too Furious. 7, The Fate of the Furious. Number 8, Tokyo Drift. 9, Hobbs and Shaw. 10 is Fast X, and 11, F9, The Fast Saga. So like I said, Furious 7 sitting at number 2. But honestly, it's more like, Fast 5 is 1A, Furious 7 is 1B, and then Fast and Furious 6 is 2. Any given day, you could take those top 3 films and any one of them could be my favorite. But I think Furious 7 is in the right spot at 2, because I think overall Fast 5 is just a better made movie. The vault sequence at the end of that is just unbeatable. But yeah, it's tough to rank anything above that tribute to Paul Walker, and just the emotion behind Furious 7 coming out it's that itself is unbeatable. So it's really, really tough to rank anything above it. But I think if anything can beat it, it's Fast 5 for sure. So that is the Fast Furious rankings right now. Next week, or maybe next week, I'll be on vacation. So the Fate of the Furious episode might come out next week. It might come out the week after. Just keep an eye out when that episode drops. But yeah, I'll talk about that, and we'll go over these rankings again. Maybe that one will move up. Maybe it'll move down. I honestly haven't seen it in about a year or so. So I'm excited to rewatch that again after watching Paul Walker's Fast film. So check out this list on IMDb or Letterboxd, whichever one you prefer. Just search for Cinematic Reviews, and you can find the entire library of lists that I've done. I've done got to be over almost 100 now. I'm adding rankings on there all the time. I love ranking. It's one of the reasons why I made the podcast. It's one of the reasons why it's a segment on the podcast, because I love ranking. I love discussing why I put a movie above another, why this franchise ranks the way it does. It's just really fun. So check out those today. Well, that'll do it for this week's Fast and Furious episode here on Cinematic Reviews. Like I said, there might be an episode next week. It might get pushed back to the week after. It just depends, because I will be on vacation. So just keep an eye out for the Fate of the Furious episode to drop on your favorite podcast network. In the meantime, you can check out the rest of the Cinematic Reviews library on your favorite podcast service, including new release reactions. Until then, always remember to live life a quarter mile at a time.